Marco Polo, His Travels and Adventures, Chapter 12, Part 1. Marco Polo among the Hindus. India, at the time that Marco visited it, was divided into a great many independent states, some Hindu and some Mohammedan, each ruled over by its own sovereign. It was not, as now, the dependency of a great foreign power, but as India was 6 centuries ago in its faith, manners, and customs, and the character of its people, so it is very much today. Many of the manners and customs which Marco observed still exist, and we find in the Hindus of the present very much the same peculiar vices and virtues as those he's described. Marco found the Hindus, like most of the Orientals he had seen, very much under the influence of magicians and astrologers. They were very superstitious, and there were many omens, the warnings of which they always took care to obey, believing that if they did not do so, misfortune would fall upon them. A man who set out on a journey, if he met with what he considered an evil omen, would turn back and go straight home again, no matter how near he might be to his destination or how pressing his business. The day, hour, and minute of the birth of every child were recorded, simply to enable the magicians to make predictions concerning his future life. As soon as a boy reached his 13th birthday, he became independent of his parents and went out into the world to make his own living, having received a small sum of money from his father with which to make a start. They did very much as poor boys, dependent on themselves, do in our day, found something to hawk about the streets and sell, on which they could make a little profit. Near the seashore, they were in the habit of watching on the beach for the pearl boats to come in, and would buy a few small pearls of a fisherman and carry them into the interior and sell them to the merchants. Having made a little money, they would go and buy some provisions for their mothers, who still prepared their food for them. Marco saw many monasteries nestling amid the mountains and hills as he progressed through the country, and learned that these monasteries were full of idols adorned with gold and precious stones. To the care and worship of these idols, large numbers of lovely girls were sacrificed by their parents, and these girls were in the habit, every day, of cooking savory dishes and placing them, with great reverence, before the hideous idols. As the idols did not descend from their pedestals and partake of the food, Marco wondered what became of it. He soon found out, for having been admitted to one of the monasteries as a great favor, he saw the girls offer the idols their daily meal, after which they began to dance some very quick and graceful dances, singing the while a loud, wild, joyous chorus. When they ceased dancing and singing, they went up to the dishes, and, supposing the idols had eaten as much as they desired, the girls themselves devoured the contents of the plates. Marco was told that these girls remained in the monasteries until the very day of their marriage. The priests of the monasteries at once attracted Marco's attention, so singular was their aspect and so strange their mode of living. Many of them seemed to be very old men, with long snowy beards and bent forms, yet they had fresh, dark complexions, and were very active in their movements. Marco was told that they often lived to be 150 or even 200 years old, but he had now been in India long enough not to believe everything he heard. The priests lived on nothing but rice, apples, and milk, and for a beverage drank a curious mixture of quicksilver and sulfur. In some of the monasteries, the priests always went perfectly naked, even in winter, and slept in the open air, and led a very severe and self-denying life. The only symbol of their sacred office was a little copper or bronze ox, an animal they worshipped, which they wore on their foreheads. These priests were always very careful not to kill any living thing, for they thought that not only animals and insects, but even fruits and flowers had souls. They would not harm so much as a fly or a worm, and would not eat apples until they were all dried up, for they supposed them when fresh to be alive, and only dead when they were shriveled. When a young man sought to become a priest in the monasteries, he underwent what seemed to Marco a very amusing trial. On arriving at the monasteries, the fairest young girls belonging to it came forth to meet him, and gathering around him, overwhelmed him with kisses and embraces. The old priest, meanwhile, stood by and keenly watched him. If he betrayed any pleasure at the caresses of the girls, he was at once rejected and sent into the outer world again. But if he submitted to them coldly and with unmoved countenance, he was admitted to the priesthood. As the envoy of the Khan, Marco was admitted into the best society of the places that he visited, and he was much struck with the manners and virtues of the higher class of Hindus. These comprised the class which we know as the Brahmins. He could not fail to notice their high sense of honor in their dealings with each other, their truthfulness and probity, the temperance and purity of their lives. They ate no flesh and drank no wine, and as husbands were models of fidelity. The Brahmins, to designate their rank, wore a long silk thread over the shoulder and across the breast, and so do the Brahmins of our own time. The only habit they had which Marco did not like was that of chewing betel leaves. This made their gums very red and was thought to be healthy, but it caused them to be constantly spitting. Intelligent as the Brahmins seemed, they were as completely under the influence of superstition and magic as the lowest and most ignorant of their country folk. When a Brahmin merchant was about to make a bargain for some goods, he rose at sunlight, went out, and caused his shadow to be measured. If it was of a certain length, he went on with the trade. If not, he postponed it to another day. This is perhaps the origin of the Eastern greeting, "May your shadow never be less." If a Brahmin proposed to buy an animal, he went where it was and observed whether the animal approached him from a lucky direction. If so, he bought it, but if not, he would have nothing to do with it. If, when a Brahmin issued from his house, he heard a man sneeze in a way which seemed to him of bad omen, he turned around, went into his house again, and waited till the man who sneezed unluckily was quite out of sight. In the same way, a Brahmin who, walking along a road, saw a bird approaching from the left, at once turned on his heel and went the other way.